Okay, you'll get a notification saying that I'm recording, everyone.
So I'm Tamara Adlin. I am joining you live from Green Lake in Seattle. And like I said, I'm you in 25 years. I graduated from HCDE with my master's in 1996 when it was still called technical communication. And ever since then, I stayed in Seattle in the high-tech world. I started doing a bunch of startups. Then I went to Amazon for 3 years. I think somebody needs to mute.
Yeah, somebody needs to mute, or maybe you could all mute for now. Thanks.
And I worked at Amazon for 3 years, and then I ran screaming from Amazon, as one does, and started working in startups again. And I co-founded Fell Swoop, which is still doing great work. I just am not part of it anymore. Fell Swoop is an agency, so I tried the agency route, and then I went back out on my own, and I've been doing that ever since. And I'm sort of known in the community for my work on personas. I have a couple of the persona lifecycle books. I co-authored those. And I love to come and talk to your classes. So some of you have seen me in your classes talking about personas and stuff. And the other thing I'm really passionate about is career development, and particularly career development for women, because women are so lousy at standing up for themselves, including me. And so, but all of the sort of career stuff that I've learned over the years, I think applies no matter what gender you are. And so I think I'll probably have a little bit of a different perspective because I am not a recruiter. I do not hire people. I have not been at a big company for many years. But I have the perspective that we all have to make ourselves usable as a product. And you have to look at yourself as a product when you're trying to get a job or get a promotion. And you have, just like with a product, you need to understand the goals and motivations of your users, like your bosses, and the business needs. And so how does the work that you do tie directly to business bottom line issues? And so I'm happy to start with any of your questions.
Hey, Tamara. Sorry, y'all. I'm Rebecca Costello. I was having trouble getting my computer to connect to this call, so really apologize for being late. Tamara, I'm really happy to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited to talk to you about this topic.
My pleasure, my friend. Computers are hard, which is good for all of us because it's job security.
Yes, so much so. All right, so as you know, students had written in previous to this call to ask questions. One of the most popular question subjects is around salaries and compensation. And I think you're so good at answering these questions. Tamara, I love your frank honesty around this. So I'm excited to dig into this with you. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, let's do this. All right, so question here. What specific language can we use to initiate negotiation discussions? Like, how do you start?
Okay, so if you are in okay, so either you're in negotiation mode anyway because you're getting a new job, but it sounds like you're talking about negotiation once you already have a job. So I'll assume the second one first, okay? So I'll assume you already have a job and you're trying to figure out how to get into negotiation type language. And what I would, and I'm not an expert in any of this either, I just have a slightly different perspective. What I would say is, you need to understand what your boss's job is and the constraints that are on your boss, okay? So your boss's job is to help you with career development. Your boss's job, the other pressures that they're under are keeping headcount the same or embiggening it, handling their budget, or managing the fact that they only have so much to give out for raises. You sort of have to think about that a little bit first and understand it. And it can also be useful to talk to people who are bosses, even perhaps in the same company, to understand what those pressures are. But when you're meeting with your boss, I think you should always be in the habit of setting aside some time to talk about your own career goals and your own career advancement. And your boss, if they're a good boss, should want to engage with you on this, because you saying that you want to advance your career means that you're still really, hopefully you present it in a way where you're really enjoying the work that you're doing. You're feeling ready to take on more work. You're feeling excited and motivated to keep all your talents at this company and keep working at the company. And so the way I would start it is I would say, I would love to get a plan in place where I understand what my goals should be if I would like to advance in my career. What my goals should be in order to achieve a raise or in order to achieve a title bump. So to me, what I would say is you start the conversation way earlier than just, I want more money. You start the conversation the next time you have a meeting with your boss, you start the conversation and say, I'd like to talk some about career development. And remember, it's part of their job to help you with this. So it's not an illegal conversation to have. You should be having it anyway. And then what I'd say is, can we set some goals or milestones that will help me if I want to get a raise and or get a bump in position? Now that's the generic answer. If you're trying to get a raise because your salary is too low, or you're trying to bump up the money in an initial negotiation, I think the answers would be a little different.
Well, and speaking of that, like, how do you know if you're being paid what you're worth? Like, when you go into that conversation, I think some of the things that are tricky, one is just that opening, like, ask, like, how do you frame it? And I think you did a great job giving some tips there. But how do you know if you're being paid what you're worth in the first place?
I think you have to ask around. I mean, you know, I could answer all the, you do the research on pay scale and blah, blah, blah. And there is a website that I didn't know about until recently, and it's called Levels, Levels. And I think it's levels.io, but I'm not entirely sure. And what it does, its UI is a little bit of a cluster, but you can go in there and you can put in like Microsoft Designer level 3, and you can see the actual pay range at the larger companies. You sort of have to get your head around how they do levels and stuff, and, you know, tiers and numbers and all of that crud, but it's really, really good for a range. Those ranges are great if you are looking for work at a larger or more established company. If you're looking for work in a startup, I think it's really important to ask around. And if people are uncomfortable sharing their salaries with you, what I would do is I would call and say, just give me a sense of whether you think I'm shooting too low or too high if I ask for 120 or if I ask for 90 or something like that. You put the number out there and let the person react to it so that they don't feel on the spot of telling you how much they're making, right? And often you can do that even with people you don't know very well. You could ask your teachers who work at various places. You can ask them who to ask. Sometimes you can reach out to people on LinkedIn. And it's weird, but it's not that weird. And if you're not putting them on the spot to share something that they don't want to share, then it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I recommend too, I just want to add on to that, finding somebody that is around the same level as you and getting comfortable enough with them to share your salary and your benefits packages. So anytime you get a raise or change a job, you share that with your person, and then you can, I mean, I just think it gives you the advantage over so many other candidates in the field.
Well, I think you should have a tribe for sure. And I think it should be more than one person. And it's not something where you have to get together as a group like this and have the conversation about it. But I have several people that I have talked to throughout my career. And every time I'm in some kind of negotiation, I call 1 or 2 or 3 or all 5 of them. And you probably already know some of these people today. They're people you're graduating with, or maybe already graduated. They're people you'll meet in your first jobs. And you have to have a conversation around salary. So one of the interesting things about salary is we're all trained not to share our salary information, right? But if you think about that for a minute, who does that benefit? That benefits the companies we work for. That does not benefit us, right? If you're in the same company, sharing your salary with a colleague is tricky, because I say it's tricky because I think what you do after you know is tricky, right? But if you're in different companies, then why not have a conversation about talking about money with your friends. And that conversation looks like this. I really want to be able to talk about money and benefits with you, right? And if you're interested and willing to do that, I would really like to do that. And one of the things you're going to have is a safe word, because one of you is going to get some big raise and the other one is going to internally collapse when you hear it. Like you're making 100,000 and your friend is making 100,000, and then suddenly your friend gets a raise up to 110. And the only way to react to that as a human being is to take it personally and think that it's some reflection on you. So the way I deal with that with my friends who get these great offers, I'm like, I'm having a moment of jealousy. I would like to have that amount of money. Okay, now that I've said it out loud, I'm past it, and let's go try to get you even more. For me, I find saying that stuff out loud and diffusing it is good. And then you make it about them, and you make it about you, a different conversation when they're ready to help you and motivate you to get the same thing. It's tricky, but it's doable to have blunt conversations about money. And when people ask me for advice on this stuff, I tell them, just tell me the numbers. We're so not used to that, but find people you can do that with.
Yeah, that's great advice. I definitely agree on the only people that benefit from us not sharing our salaries with one another are the companies that we work for, because it gives them an advantage. And then you come in, you just get an offer to join a company. They ask you like, what do you want? And you have no idea where to start. So if you know the answer to this, what do you think is a good starting salary for a junior UX researcher in tech and then outside of tech? Like there's definitely a difference in
I
pay
have
there.
zero idea. I literally have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. I'm
Right.
sorry. I mean,
That's
the place
totally
that I would go to answer that is that website Levels. And I would look and see what Microsoft and Amazon pay for researchers. And I would start from there. So these big giant public companies do well, even if they don't publish it, people who work at them are sharing what their salary ranges are. So that's where I would go first.
Yeah. There's also a Glassdoor you can check, though I think it's not always exactly right. There's wild variations in the industry, even here in Seattle, for entry level and senior as well. So definitely important to do your homework, find your tribe, ask around. Definitely good advice there. All right. So there's this other question here about how much more is acceptable to ask for when negotiating a salary. So you've got that job offer. They tell you, Tamara, we're going to give you $110,000 a year. Should you come back 5% high, 10%? Like what's your advice?
Well, you should always negotiate. I've talked to people like recruiters who have said sometimes they've had to tell women to negotiate. The recruiter tells the woman to negotiate.
Yeah.
There's always, first of all, I have to answer a slightly different question. When you're talking to a recruiter, you are talking to someone whose job it is and motivation it is to get your ass in a chair and not to have it be complex for them, the recruiter. That is not the hiring manager. That is not the person who's going to be your boss, right? The recruiter would really like it if you would believe them when they tell you that there is no room to negotiate. You are absolutely at the top of the scale, and you have to answer right now, right? That is never true. So when you get an offer for a job, let's say you get an offer for $100,000. Here's my rule of thumb. You are never, ever allowed to accept that offer until 24 hours has gone by. Give yourself that rule. And what you say to them is, let me think about that, right? Because if you're put on the spot, that is not the easiest way to have a conversation about that number, right? And they're going to say, well, really, there's no room, and like maybe it's, tiny bit, but not really, and blah, 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 blah. And you just say, what you need to do is just come back to some very simple words. When you're in negotiation, shut up. Shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up. We do all the talking. It is the recruiter's job to do the talking, the hiring manager's job to do the talking. It is your job to listen and tell them that you need a minute to think about it. Okay. And then if you come back, you need to then go do your research. Okay. So it's not about 5% or 10%. It's wait 24 hours. Don't give a number right away. You can give a number within that 24 hours, but don't come right away. You can come right away and say, that's really that's significantly out of line with what I was expecting, right? And, but let me get back to you on that. But give yourself the time to process. Then you go figure out how much more you should ask for, right? And then you have a reason to ask for that additional money. When you ask for that additional money, the way I would do it, and by the way, every time I do this, I need a coach because it's awful. It's the most nauseating thing you're ever going to have to do, but it only takes 10 seconds, which is my 10-second story. What you have to do is say something like, you've offered 110. I need the number to be 125, which if you throw up on yourself, I will forgive you. But then you shut your mouth. You do not explain why. You do not defend that number. All you're allowed to do is repeat the same thing. I need the number to be 125. And they say, well, blah, 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 argue, 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 make you feel like an idiot, blah, blah, blah. Can you look into that? I need the number to be 125. That's it. If any of you say any more, I will feel it like a force in the universe and I will come slap you across the face. Okay? Can you look into that for me? Right? And they might say, no, I can't. If they say, no, I can't, that's kind of ridiculous. But then you give that time buffer. Well, if you could look into that for me, I can also think about what you've told me. But the minute that you've said that, it's not your job anymore. Now it's their job. Don't do their job for them. I need the number to be 125. Can you look into that for me? That's it. No other words will be helpful to you in this situation. The second it's out of your mouth, it's their job. Okay, so the 10-second story that I'll babble about for a second is there's a crappy movie called We Bought a Zoo. And it's this guy who goes back to his hometown after his wife has died with his 2 beautiful children. And he goes back to buy this roadside zoo, which is a terrible, awful thing in my opinion. And the person who happens to be running it is Scarlett Johansson, who's also terrible and awful in my opinion. But of course they, are just destined to fall in love. But anyway, he's wandering around in his hometown with his kids and he stops outside this diner with this big window and he said, kids, right there, see that table right there? That's where I first saw your mother. She was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen in my entire life. And I almost kept walking, but I didn't. I went inside and I said hello to her. And he said, you know what the lesson there is? Sometimes you have to be really, really brave, but only for 10 seconds. Mm-hmm. We treat negotiation like it's a marathon. It's not even a sprint. Right? So what you need is friends where you can say, I need the number to be 125. I need the number to be 125. I need the number to be 125. Can you look into that? Until you're able to say that out of your mouth without throwing up.
Mm-hmm. That's solid advice. And I just want to tell you that your description of that movie sounds like an amazing movie. And now I might go watch it.
Okay, well, it's freaking Matt Damon and Scarlett Johansson, both of whom drive me absolutely up a wall. But I use that story all the time. So yes, go ahead.
Sorry. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what I find out. All right. So I think some of the things that we worry about when we are negotiating raises or title changes in our careers, even, when we have like not that much experience, like less than 3 years, or even when we're more senior, we're worried that we're going to come off looking greedy or impatient, like we should be pacing ourselves for some reason, trying to grow our careers, grow our skills. Like, how do we, can you offer advice? And I think we're kind of getting at it with like doing the 10-second thing. But any other advice you have around negotiating salaries or title changes when you're still early in your career?
Okay,
Without looking greedy.
I do have advice about this. And I do think that people put themselves on a timeline and it's not necessarily the right thing to do. First of all, I'll tell you, titles always matter. This is less important. I mean, getting the right level or whatever, if you're going to Microsoft or Facebook or something, there are levels and you have to figure out the right one and not take one that's too low. If you're going into a smaller company or a startup, they will inevitably tell you that titles don't matter here, which really translates into we're kind of chicken about thinking about our company in terms of hierarchy and we didn't want to do it yet. So, that's just they're being lame. But titles almost always matter. And so what I would say about this is get to know the org structure of the company and team and organization that you're going into. Okay. So if you're going on into a bigger company and you're going in at level 1 and there's 3 levels and 3 is the highest, then you can also talk to them about what is the typical trajectory to get from one level to the next, to the next, to the next. And then you can also tell them if we set goals for this, then is that, and I meet those goals a little bit more quickly, is that something that can help me get to this next level or next salary more quickly? If you're going into a younger company or a startup, you still want to see their org chart. And what you want to do also is ask them, where do you want this org chart to be in a couple of years? How do you see design evolving? Is there going to be a VP of UX? Is that VP of UX going to sit at the same level, shoulder to shoulder with the VP of engineering? Have you thought about that yet? If they have not thought about this yet, you're going to be part of what teaches them that, right? So you are going to have the responsibility of going out there and reading a little bit about how UX teams evolve in smaller companies so that you can say, I'm looking at your product, I'm believing in your product, I think you're going to be like, how many more people do you think you're going to have in 1 year and 2 year overall? And they should know that number because they're doing budgeting for their fundraisers, right? That have to do with headcount. So if you guys have 10 people in your company today, how many do you expect to have in 18 months? Of that headcount that you've already planned, how many of those are in design, right? And you start having conversations like that, because then you can say, oh, okay, you have thought about design. You do think you're going to have 2 more UX people once that happens. Well, once that happens, it makes sense to put someone in a lead. So I would like us to start talking about me evolving into a lead position as we start building up that organization underneath. What you're actually going to find is that they haven't budgeted anything for more UX people, and you're going to have to teach them about that. Yes. So the bigger point that I'm making here that is important for all of us is to get a little bit more fluent in business, right? And to understand ourselves as a cog in a larger wheel. The more you understand how the organization is put together and how it works, the less it becomes about you scrabbling to get one step further and one step further and one step further, which you may be doing in an insane way because there's only ever going to be one UX person, which it would be better for you to know than not know. So get out of your own head a little bit. And if you want to accelerate at your company, I think you should be able to show your boss an org chart of where you think you do fit, right? So do some of that work. And you can get help with that. And anybody who's been in business, working for a while could probably help you get some perspective on that. You may very well find that there is no place for you to grow at that company. If that's the case, you may decide to move to a different company, or you may decide to take on the idea of, I'm going to teach this company and prove why we should be spending more money on UX, but you're going to have to do that in business terms too. See what I mean? So the very best way to get ahead is to speak the language of your boss and your grand boss and your great grand boss. and look at the bigger picture and be able to place yourself like a puzzle piece in there. And then once you're able to say, look, this is the slot where I belong. I think I belong here within 12 months. What's it going to take for me to get here within 12 months? Can we set some measurable goals that I can go after? Once you have those measurable goals set and you have a verbal sort of encouragement from your boss that that is likely to achieve the level rise that you want, then you go for it. There's all sorts of variations of this. There's sometimes where they want to give you a title and not the money. Often they want to, as you proceed in your career, after your first job, always consider titles to be equally as important as salaries, right? My response to a startup that says we don't do titles here is, then you should just give me the one I want, because who cares? Right? Titles don't mean anything here, which is kind of facetious, but never discount that. Every single time that I have talked to a colleague who has gone into a job and compromised on the title, they have always regretted it. And the reason is because you can't do the work that you were hired to do if your title is too low. You just can't do it. If you're trying to do VP level work and you're a director, you cannot do VP level work. You just can't, just because of your title. So after job one, titles matter.
I think it's also like an accumulation. If you come in and take a job that's a job title that's lower than what you're actually qualified for, that can set you back a whole year on the climbing up the ladder of the different levels. So absolutely, like, you should be going for the thing that you're qualified for and that you deserve.
Which means that you have to know how the org structure looks.
Yeah. I want to underline the point you said about us learning about business. And I think that gives you such an edge when you're coming into a business, not just like, being able to negotiate for yourself, but also understanding how things work and using your edge to your advantage. I think it's super important. So let's just talk now a little bit about titles, since we're kind of touching in here now. There was a question that was posted. I'm just going to short it just a little bit. There's this question around this person is hesitant about accepting an offer that they don't feel is the right level. They feel like they're the next level up. But this is their first job in UX. So how do you reconcile that? One, especially in Seattle, where a lot of people are coming out of HCDE, they're coming out of other schools, and everybody's competing for these jobs. Should you take the job that isn't quite the right level that you think you should be at, but it's the one that you're being offered? Like, do you make these trade-offs, or do you just keep going? Like, what do you advise?
Yeah, this is a very tricky one. And I think also to the master's students who are on the call, there's also a lot of people who are getting their master's degree who have never worked before, because we tend to go straight from undergrad to master's degree. And actually that puts you at a disadvantage, because you're going to think that you belong at a higher level, even though you've never worked before and don't know the realities of business. You may belong at a higher level, I don't know, but it is a competitive world out there, because General Assembly is pumping out like 40 people who consider themselves to be experts in 10 weeks, every 10 weeks, right? Here's what I would say. You have to be able to explain from a business perspective why it is that you're at this different level. If you can't, if it's just because you feel like you should be at that level, then you don't have a leg to stand on. If you are being offered a job that's too low, but you're really excited about it, what you say is that I feel that this is the wrong level. I'm very excited about your company. I'm very excited about this job. In order to take this job, I would like to create with you a 6-month plan to put me at what I feel is the right level, and tell me what I would have to achieve in order to be considered for that in 6 months, or at the very latest in a year. So you can kind of have both worlds, right? You can say, I'm planning to come in and over deliver for you at this level. I know that's a position that's open right now, but because I do have these credentials and I do have this experience, it's very important for me to see a pathway that I can work towards and prove to you my value. you might hear, well, we're not going to have another headcount for a level 2 in the next 3 years. Okay, then don't take that job, because you're going to be really upset about it and pissed about it. So you have to be able to very clearly see the path. And in the beginning, in a negotiation process, you can say, I would like to prove to you in 6 months that I'm a level 2. How could I go about doing that? And is that a viable goal for me to have?
I just want to reflect a little bit on your advice that we've had so far this evening. A lot of it has to do with being very clear about your expectations, working with your manager, and setting out a path that's going to help meet your expectations. And I really want to just double click on that, because I think it's important for us to keep that in mind. Most of our managers, the good ones and even the kind of mediocre ones, are invested in your career growth and your trajectory, but they don't know what they don't know. So you have to tell them what you want. Otherwise, you might get passed up for things that you might have been qualified to get if you're not raising your hand. And I think that's really important to just overstate there.
And you should always be able to pull out a sheet of paper that says what goals you are working towards and why, and how those attach to the business goals of the organization, right? I'm a big one for saying that business goals are always appropriate to ask for, and unfortunately almost never exist because they change so much and nobody writes them down. But the more you can attach what you're doing on a daily basis, like if I came in and tapped you on the shoulder and said, what are you doing? And you said research on X, and I said why, you should be able to tell me, because one of my personal development goals is doing XYZ amount of blah de blah in the next 6 months. And also this work attaches directly to our overarching business goal, which is to increase the number of customers by 15% in the next fiscal year.
Right. Excellent. All right. So is there a frequency of which I should be looking to get promoted? What do you think?
Well, you should understand the promotion cycles of the company that you work in. And you can understand those by talking to other employees that have been there for a while and just ask them. Because what happens in companies is they tend to get a cadence of promotions that have nothing to do with you. They existed a long time before you ever showed up, right? So understand what you're walking into, right? And have a plan for that before you even take the job. I think we all assume this has a lot more to do with us individually than it actually does. Right? Because once you're in a company, you understand, like, that's just not how it's done. It has nothing to do with you. It's just not how it's done. So that means you have to know, how is it done? Mm-hmm. I think you have to create the plan for yourself and stick to it. If you find out that a promotion is not possible in the next year for whatever reasons they give you, then make a plan for 2 years and make sure you're comfortable with that. Right? And it could be that you just are negotiating for a slightly higher title if they don't have the budgets. Like, it's going to be crazy in the next couple of years, and who knows who's going to have budget for what. You can set goals where you actually have like an increase in authority or a broader job description or something where you're learning more and your title increases so that you can use that for your next job. But you need to be able to present the solution to your boss in that case, and not just the problem. If they say there's no money for promotions in the next 3 years, we're not going to have any more headcount, so there's not going to be people for you to manage, blah, 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 then you have to snoop around there and figure out ways that you can be valuable beyond the way that you're being valuable today. Can you provide additional research for other teams? Can you train the entire organization on how they can do better design work in their own orgs? What can you do to expand your value and be of more financial value to the company?
That's great. Tamara, I just want to do a time check. I think we're supposed to end like around 5:30. It's after 5:30. Are you good to keep going?
I'm good to keep going. Yeah, I'm just going to put on my evening wear.
Excellent.
Because we're talking about money.
I'll put on my evening wear then.
Yeah, so if we're talking about money, I feel all of us should be dripping in diamonds within a few years of getting our first job.
Oh, that's fabulous.
So all of these are real, by the way.
Of course they are, because you've done a great job negotiating your salaries.
I have. So, okay.
Nice.
I feel better now. I'll be able to just run out the door now to my next appointment.
Excellent. Awesome. All right. So for those of you hanging in there and participating, I get it if you need to pop off, but thank you for continuing to stay, and we'll just keep going. All right. So the other question that came up around titles was the promotions feel like they're all over the place. There's some senior designers, they have the senior title, they have like 8 years experience, but then there's others that have just 4 years of experience. What gives?
Okay, here's what gives. The people writing the job descriptions have a problem. They don't know the solution, right? I mean, it could be that the company is really well established, like Microsoft or Amazon or something, and they have these levels and they are what they are, right? And they just say, this is a level 2 or level 46 or whatever it is. Every other company on the planet, they don't know what they need. They know they have a problem. And here's how they put together job descriptions. You want an insider view of putting together job descriptions? Hey, Rebecca, can you throw together something for that job description? The words throw together and job description always happen at the same time. Guaranteed. Yeah, I'll put something together. The amount of thought that goes into a job description is usually about this big. Okay? And we take them and we treat them like they are royalty. We pore over them. And we look at every single little bullet. And if we find one bullet we don't qualify for, we're like, darn! And we don't even try, right? Mm-hmm. So I have this method for thinking about job description. So what I'm telling you is, I don't know, right? They're calling it a senior designer. Who knows? You don't, until you can see their org chart, don't pay any attention to what the title is, right? I mean, if they're asking for a senior designer and you've never had a job before, it's unlikely you're going to get that job. It just is. But if they say 5 years and you only have 4 years, you can still apply. Now, in some cases, amount of years and some of the language on those job descriptions are tied into a level system. If it's a bigger company, like in order to get this salary, you have to have this many years of experience or whatever. But in general, I say, consider the job description to be a big, dumb bully and break it apart for pieces. I have an article I'm working on this, okay? So every day, find 2 job descriptions. I don't care what the level is. And create a spreadsheet, okay? And in the first column, you copy and paste every bullet that you're already qualified for. Don't skip that part. First column's gonna get enormous. Second column is what I call 2 weeks and 2 books. These are things that you could get reasonably good at if you had a little time to study, right? So like basic SEO. I don't wanna, but if I had to, in 2 weeks and 2 books, as long as it wasn't completely central to my job, I could get good enough, probably. Third column is 4 to 6 months, goosebumps, right? Usually when you're in a job and looking for another job, you're so overwhelmed and tired, you feel like you're never gonna be valuable again. But maybe the job description says manage 4 people, and maybe you've never managed any people before. Well, could you imagine yourself getting totally freaking jazzed about managing a team? Could you become really good at that in 4 to 6 months? Do you have goosebumps? Probably. Put it there. And the last column is fuck that. I'm sorry. The fuck that column is, we would like you to be an expert UX designer and do Ruby on Rails coding, except for you, Siddhant, who probably can do that, right? These are things you can't do because you don't want to do them, right? Also, make lunch for the entire team every Thursday. It's like, no, I don't want to do that. But the thing I'm telling you is that there's 3 different categories of no. 2 weeks and 2 books, goosebumps in 4 to 6 months, and fuck it, right? And if you do that and you break these job descriptions down for parts, you're gonna see that column A starts getting really enormous. And you're not gonna just like crash into a wall when you see something you don't qualify for. Mm-hmm. By the way, there are studies that say, if a man, probably a white man, sees 1 bullet in a job description that he qualifies for, he'll apply. If a woman sees 1 bullet that she does not qualify for, she won't apply. And I understand this because I have the same reaction. Remember, they're big, dumb, stupid bullies, and you should rip them to shreds. And then, by the way, also in column A, you're going to have a whole bunch of good language for your resume.
So true. Yeah. I think the other thing that's funny about job descriptions is sometimes they're just boilerplates, or they're like general. They're not specific to the actual job you'll be doing. So it could be that you're qualified for that one bullet point, you submit your resume, and the hiring manager is like, yes, this is exactly the person I'm looking for. So it doesn't hurt to try. Why not? Like, you'll never know until you try. So
I'd also try to reverse engineer what problems they're trying to solve out of the bullets, right? Because they're often telling you like what you'll be doing every day. It's like, what's going on here? Do they just have a bunch of overflow work that they need done, or, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good point too. All right. Let's talk about experience. So this is a problem every new grad experiences. They go out to look, they're about to be done with their master's program or their undergrad, and they go to look at job descriptions, and most of them say require 3 to 5 years of experience. Like, how do you, like, what's the deal there? And what does somebody do about that? What's your advice?
Well, first of all, do the thing I told you and break apart the bullets, right? Because then at least you'll have a shot at it. If they're looking for somebody with 3 to 5 years experience, they want to know that you can do the work. And they probably also don't want you to be a huge pain in the ass who has never had a job before and comes in being really entitled, which is what happens a lot, and which is going to happen. You have to be careful about that. If you're a master's student who's now going in to get jobs, you're going to feel somewhat entitled. The problem is you don't know what you don't know yet, right? So there is a fine balance there. If you can get in and prove yourself, then fantastic. Then you should be able to achieve rapid growth for yourself. In terms of having no experience at all. So another graduate, he graduated the same year I did. His name is Doug Pyle, and he wrote a really good article that he posted on LinkedIn, and we can send you the link for it. It's on Medium too. He's a UX recruiter, not a UX manager who has hired tons of UX people. And he talks about what he looks for in resumes, right? One of the things you need to do if you are looking for a job with more experience is you need to have a portfolio site that is less studenty. And let me tell you how to do that. You have to focus on business type goals, and you have to focus on what's differentiated about you. So what I would say to you is think about your 3 superpowers. Now, your superpowers are going to get stronger over time, but there's something that you're probably particularly good at, right? That not everybody is. Maybe you're the person who always takes the lead of the team. Maybe you're the person who's always willing to ask the dumb questions. Maybe you're the person who's really good at being a mediator between fighting people. Maybe you're the person who could have a conversation with a sock and the sock would still report an enjoyable conversation. I don't know what it is about you, but what is it like someone would say, oh, we need to go get Linda, or we need to go find Caleb because he's particularly good at this. Start to own those for yourselves, right? And they will continue to develop over time. And typically superpowers are things that you're good at that you don't put any value in. Like for some reason, I'm really good at like looking at a UI and seeing like a couple easy things that you could change, right? I named that UX Ray Vision. It comes easy to me for some reason. It probably comes easy to some of you. Or seeing, you know, figuring out the easiest way to research something for free. Or figuring out how to create a scaled model so you can start really, whatever it is, start knowing what those things are. And it's going, at least 2 of them are going to be things that you discount about yourself. So ask your friends, right? Ask your mom if you have to, although 3 is never going to be enough to describe you. But start to get a handle on that. And then make sure when you look at your portfolio and your resume, or at least your portfolio, that you're starting to highlight, here's what I added to this. These long case studies that all look the same, nobody reads them. Don't do that. Start out with like, if you need to know one thing about me and this project, In fact, use that. If you need to know one thing about me and this project, here's what you should know. We had to completely change directions 4 weeks in. Everybody freaked out, and I managed to get everybody calmed down and back on track within 2 days. Has nothing to do with the fact that this thing tested well. Has to do with the fact that you were able to like calm down a herd of freaked out students.
Yeah, that would make me read the case study. I don't typically read through case studies online because they are so long and detailed. Like, and I don't know enough about the context of that case study to really care. But what I want to know is that, like, did you do something to save the day? Did you turn things around? Like, what was your major impact? Another tip for that is to include like a TLDR, like a too long didn't read at the top of your case study. Like, here are the main points for people who
are points about you.
Yes, about
not
what you
about the
did.
Project.
Not your project, but about what you did to make the big thing happen, or whatever it was, right? Definitely.
Maybe it's simple, but that's okay, because simple skills are what people look for. Nobody wants a pain in the ass on their team. Yeah. And if somehow in one of your case studies you showed that you're really flexible and managed to calm a bunch of people down, that might get their attention, because if all else being equal, it would be great to have somebody who is a, great moderator, or a great cheap and cheerful, or a great details person, which might be the opposite of cheap and cheerful. If your happy place is rolling around in an Excel spreadsheet for 4 hours, fantastic. Write down, my happy place is rolling around in an Excel spreadsheet for 4 or 5 hours. Somebody's going to want that.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the current economy.
Yay!
Such a happy place to like kind of dig in. What do you think? Should we, for people who are just graduating and getting out there, should they just go ahead and just take anything so they can get their foot in the door? Or like, is there room to be choosy still? What's your thinking?
I don't know yet. I mean, I think that there's going to be, so a couple things are going to happen, right? Like, there's going to be enormous layoffs at some companies that have a huge amount of talent. So Uber, Expedia, a bunch of Alaska Airlines, and there's going to be more. REI, like, they have some badasses, right? Now, those are a couple levels above you, and that's fine. So there will be some gluts in some areas. I think you still want to have that role for yourself, that if you take a lower end role, it's because you really are excited about the company and or product, and you've had a discussion about what will it mean to have a goal to advance relatively quickly. And you have to have a good answer for that. And if you like the answer, or you can accept the answer, then do it. Just don't look at it as a one-shot deal, right? Because it's not. I think also that you guys have an opportunity to do something really, really special. Everybody on this call has the opportunity to do something really special. Maybe you guys could even team up. I don't know. It's just my, wacky idea. But if I ruled the world, you guys would go and spend some time putting together some ideas on what it will mean to do this work remotely for the rest of time. What does it mean to user research? How are user research tools like usertesting.com going to have to change, right? Like, if any one of you, Qiming or Sam or Dawn, you decided to go and take like one tool, Figma, whatever it is, go and look at what this change in our work patterns is going to do to that tool and write up a little article or something. Start to think about the problems that other UXers are facing. And if you're not working yet, try to get a perspective on that so that you can start to help, even if it's something small, right? Like, what does it mean that we can't really use Craigslist, or maybe we can, but how do we use Craigslist to recruit for usability testing in this new world? Because we're still going to wanna. So take a piece of it and develop an opinion on it, and get some thoughts around it, because that's also going to differentiate you out there in the world, because nobody from General Assembly is doing thinking like that. But We do, because we're better than everyone in the world, and smarter and faster and prettier. So take a minute to do that.
Yeah. Excellent advice. I'd love to see people from HCDE, this graduating class especially, band together and do something really special and out there. Like I can imagine, like the one thing that I think would be, it's always been my dream, is that people get together and help nonprofits who can't afford to hire design agencies to redesign their website, something simple like that, to get experience under your belt.
By the way, there is a way to do that, which is called Seattle Give Camp.
Oh, okay.
I participated this so I rescue bunny rabbits, as those of you who were early got to see. And we were one of the nonprofits. And there are ways to get out there and offer help. Now, I know that each of you guys has a project with a company, but as you know, through going through that project, there's only so much you can do and so much you can help. What if you really did redesign a website for somebody, right? Or if you don't want to do that, if you're stuck on how to do something creative, go out there and find a really cool article that was written a year ago or 2 years ago and write your own response to it now that COVID has happened. What's changed? What's interesting? What do we have to think about next, right?
Yeah.
So take something that's out there and put your amazing scholastic skills to it. It doesn't have to be a thesis. It can just be a little piece.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we've got a few minutes left in the hour. I want to get to a couple questions that got put into the chat. Somebody asked about what advice do you have for, where is it? Eliza asked, are there any resources for designers to learn how to speak better in business terms?
There's a bunch of resources out there. In fact, Envision put out, I haven't read it yet, but Envision, which is a tool to share designs, you guys probably know about it, put out a free book called Business for Designers or something like that. You can just start to do some searches out there start to do some thinking and reading on how companies set their business goals or KPIs, key performance indicators, how companies measure themselves, right? And then also start to do some looking around at different org charts, start to understand the language of those tree structures, or even just look up the org charts for various companies. You can also look at pitch decks. So a pitch deck is what a startup puts together to get money from an investor. And it has to make a really good business case for them to get the money. And there are databases out there of pitch decks for like the Airbnb pitch deck. How did they get money the first time? And you can start to get sort of a primer on the kinds of questions people ask when they ask about business.
Yeah, nice, that's great. That's a great idea. So is there any other questions that I should have asked, but I haven't asked that you would love to answer?
You have to be brave, but only for 10 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do their job for them. Have a tribe. You've got to start having a tribe now, and you will have them as you move forward. And they don't have to be in the same company as you. Never within 24 hours. And Mindy Kaling had some quote. Mindy Kaling she was on The Office and the Mindy Project and stuff, and she has a book. One of her books talks about being entitled, and what she reminds us is that do the work and then be entitled. If you've done the work, if you can show that you've spent the hours, that you've learned it, that you've tried it, that you've got proof, and you do have the experience, then be able to say that you do know how to do it. But one thing to remember that's coming at you when you're trying to get a job is, if you have never had a job before in this milieu, you don't know what you don't know, and your lack of experience is a valid thing for them to judge you on. because there is no substitute for having a couple of years of experience working in a real company. You can never get a master's degree that will teach you what it's like to work in a real company, right? And I still work with, like, the people who work at the credit union that I work with now, a lot of them have been there for 30 years, which means some of them have never had a job at another organization. And you can tell because they just don't get how things work in the real world. So give yourself a little bit of room to still have to sort of get a little bit of a master's degree through experience, and then put all of these wonderful skills to the fore to move you forward in your career.
That's great advice. All right. Anybody have other questions they want to ask Tamara before we wrap up? Now's the time to stick them in the chat, or even just pop in, unmute your mic and ask.
I have a quick question. I have been told that companies kind of lose money on entry-level employees because they spend a lot of time training and developing them. What are your thoughts on that statement? And are companies using that line to get you to accept a lower pay?
I've never heard that line used in a negotiation. It's kind of a bananas thing to say. Not that you're bananas. I believe that's something that's out there. But companies hire because they need good work done. And if it costs them, you know, they make a decision. So they have to make, that financial picture is out of your hands and you shouldn't worry about it. If they're hiring a junior level person, they're wanting to spend less money on it. They'd love to get someone who can do the work without a ton of training and somebody who can hit the ground running. But all of them also know that there's an on-ramp, and either they have a plan for onboarding, like companies like Facebook have a great plan for onboarding. There are articles about how lousy Amazon is at onboarding, especially in the warehouses. Well, there's articles all over the place about that. But the onboarding process is something that they've thought about. No one should ever say that to you in a negotiation from the company side. That's a very weird thing to be told, and that should raise red flags for you, because that's their problem, not yours.
Erin just asked in the chat, thank you for that question, by the way. As master's students, should we be looking for internship roles or just looking for paid positions while still in the HCDE program?
Oh, gosh. While still in the HCDE. So yeah. If you're still in it, getting an internship like in between year 1 and year 2, sure, that can make a lot of sense. If you're at the end of it, if that internship can lead to something permanent, then and you have proof from them that it could lead to something permanent, then it might be worth considering. Again, never look at it at any of these things in isolation. Get the context. I mean, you can apply for them and then you can decide if it's an internship that's guaranteed to be 3 months and you don't think that it'll get you one step closer to a job, then don't take it. If it's an internship and they've hired 17 people from the internship program, that's a different story. Everybody understands that not everybody can do an internship. Internships are rarely paid, or if they're paid low. And people know that you need to make a living, right? It's not the same. Even in undergrad, most people need to make a living, but it's just not the same. You need to make a living, and they understand that. So again, just make sure you know the value of that to you. Will it look good enough? Will you have real world products? Like, will you be able to say, I worked on the Facebook news feed, right? That's the real crap. If it's some little company you've never heard of that builds fencing, and maybe you'll change some text on their website, then the value is low.
Tamara, I just want to say thank you so much for spending this hour with us. It's really great to see you. And also I want to say thanks to everyone who came tonight. Really happy to see some of my students, current and former. It's really great to see you all. Melissa, thank you so much for your help putting these together and making them happen. This is going to be a lot of fun the next few weeks as we do this. And I hope to see you all again, I think next week.
Connect with me on LinkedIn. I post a bunch of stuff there and a couple of articles. There's an article there on the responsibility of being an experienced woman in tech. And when I see job listings for UX jobs, I try to repost them there too. So
Awesome.
Oh, get your LinkedIn profiles looking good.
Oh, yeah. Yes, definitely. All right, that's it, y'all. Thank you so much for being here. Have a
Thank
great
you,
night.
guys.
Enjoy the weekend.
I'm gonna relax in my diamonds.